Tough start to Blackhawks rookie camp as Artyom Levshunov is out for the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can give me a follow on X at Jack Bushman2. And if you're watching on YouTube right now, please be sure to hit that like button, comment down below, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Currently on the climb to 2,000 subscribers, and really would like to hit that number before the regular season opens up next month. So hit that button for me. Turn on the push notifications if you want to be notified when the episode is uploaded to YouTube each and every day. And last but certainly not least, got to let you all know today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. Go and visit FanDuel.com right now to download America's #1 sports book. All right, good afternoon, everyone. As always, thank you again for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Rookie camp opened up down at Fifth Third Arena in Chicago earlier this morning. Rookie camps across the NHL have gotten underway as well. It really feels like the start of hockey season, Blackhawks fans. The fall weather hasn't quite arrived just yet. We're still getting some pretty good weather going on, but it feels like it's on the horizon. Of course, football started this past weekend as well. I hope everyone enjoyed week 1 of the NFL season. I know I did. I was down in Fort Myers with a couple of my buddies having one last little hoorah before things really get underway for me here on Locked On Blackhawks. And just as a reminder, with rookie camp opening up, I am back officially to 5 episodes per week. I know I'm only going to be doing 3 here for the rest of the week, but it's an episode every day starting right here, right now. So be sure to hit that subscribe button again, because I'm going to be recapping everything that goes down at rookie camp throughout this week, as well as the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase this weekend, and then actual Blackhawks training camp opening up 1 week from today. Unfortunately, though, I don't have the best news to talk about to start off today's episode. Is rookie camp opened up down at Fifth Third Arena. A lot of excitement about a super deep prospect pool, even though we know high-end players like Connor Bedard, Kevin Korchinski, no longer considered prospects after being NHLers last year. They're not taking part in this Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase that starts on Friday in St. Louis, but still a lot of notables, a lot of youngsters that Blackhawks have spent high round draft picks on these last couple of years are going to be in attendance, and were in attendance down at Fifth Third Arena this morning. But I think the two most notable names on the Blackhawks rookie camp roster were Frank Nazar up front in the forward group, and then Artyom Levshunov, the 2024 second overall pick that the Blackhawks got this past summer. Unfortunately, though, we didn't get to see Artyom Levshunov on the ice in day 1 of rookie camp, as it was announced he was going to miss practice this morning due to a right foot injury. And then probably about, 20 to 30 minutes later, another announcement was made that Levshunov is unfortunately going to miss the entire Prospect Showcase this upcoming weekend due to that right foot injury. Elliot Friedman posted on X as well, kind of shedding some light on the situation. There were some rumblings that Levshunov had blocked a shot off of his foot a couple of weeks ago. It fortunately isn't going to be anything that's going to keep him out long term, as I'll get to here in just a second, but not going to see Levshunov make his first little appearance in a Blackhawks sweater in game-like action in the showcase this weekend. That really does suck. It was going to be cool to see what he has in store for us. We're just going to have to be a little bit patient on that front, though. But that means Frank Nazar, all eyes undoubtedly are going to be on him. He's going to be the main man in the spotlight this weekend in St. Louis, and is going to be that the guy that us Blackhawks fans are hoping is going to be carrying the way on the offensive side of things. And then defensively, with Levshunov out, the Blackhawks, they're a little bit thin on the back end. Quite honestly, they're only two true real prospects that they have on the blue line are Nolan Allen and Ethan Del Mastro. But this is a big time opportunity for them to really get off to a good start here with training camp beginning next week, because those are two guys who, yeah, they're on the outside looking in terms of making the opening night roster, but you don't want to rule it out. Who knows if those guys go and have a standout camp, crazier things have happened. They could find themselves in the mix, and I'll be talking a little bit more about that in segment 3 in particular. But yeah, a tough blow here for the Blackhawks on day one. Certainly not how we wanted to start things off, with Artyom Levshunov not being out there and knowing we're not going to see him this weekend as well. But fortunately, according to Anders Sorensen, who talked with the media after day one at Fifth Third Arena, he said that the injury, quote, doesn't seem too bad. So I would guess that Levshunov is probably going to miss a week or two, something around that. There's not an official timeline on him as of now, but given that, it doesn't seem too bad, it kind of rules out long-term missed time, I believe. I'm going to knock on wood when I say that. But he's also the second overall pick from last year's draft, right? They already made the decision to have him forego his sophomore year at Michigan State. The last thing they want to do is go and rush him back before he's 100% healthy. And I'm sure the front office is aware of that. So probably a couple of weeks for Artyom Levshunov is what I'd expect. I'm sure we'll have more updates on his timetable as his progression kind of goes here. And I'll be sure to talk about that when we get that news here on the show, because I know there were a lot of folks concerned about Levshunov when it was announced that he wasn't going to take part in Prospect Showcase. And I'm sure a lot of people are wondering when we're going to see him in training camp and potentially in action for the Blackhawks during the preseason as well. But speaking of some other kind of effects of Artyom Levshunov being out and missing some time here for the Blackhawks, first with Levshunov himself, it was already, I said just a moment ago, Nolan Allen and Ethan Del Mastro, those two guys have outside shots to make the team out of camp. Artyom Levshunov had an even longer shot than those two guys, I believe. He's going to spend the majority of the season, barring injuries, down with the Rockford Ice Hogs, getting marinated a little bit, seasoned to the pro style game, and kind of go along that path that I think we've seen Alex Vlasic and Ethan Del Mastro on the last couple of years as well. But now that he's injured and is going to miss some more time, there was already no chance. But I think it's set in stone now that he's not going to be making the Blackhawks opening night roster out of camp. So I'd kind of dial back any expectations if anyone had any of those for him after the news of this injury. But again, I think the biggest effect of Levshunov being out is just there's going to be some more opportunities for guys, like I mentioned earlier, Allen and Del Mastro, but as well as Wyatt Kaiser, also Kevin Korchinski. Isaac Phillips is another kind of tweener who feels like he really needs to have a solid camp here to prove himself to this coaching staff. Those guys, just another spot opening up. That means more minutes, more opportunities. Really curious to see, out of all of the young defensemen, who's going to take this opportunity and really run with it the most. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the Blackhawks have a pretty weakened blue line at the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase. I really, really wanted to see Ethan Del Mastro and Artyom Levshunov paired up with one another. Now I would expect Allen and Del Mastro to really be relied on heavily by Anders Sorensen and his staff as the top pairing, with Allen likely being the one playing on his offside. And then last but certainly not least, we're just going to have to be a little bit more patient until we see Artyom Levshunov make that first little appearance in a Blackhawk sweater. Hopefully it'll be sooner rather than later. I believe he should be able to return before the Blackhawks get into preseason action here in a couple of weeks. That would be ideal. First or second game of preseason, I would expect something along those lines. But yeah, a little bit of a tough break to kick off rookie camp as the 2024 second overall pick, Artyom Levshunov, will not be playing in the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase this weekend. I'm going to take a break here real quick, Blackhawks fans, but coming up in just a moment, I'll get into the forward lines and defensive pairings we saw on the first day of rookie camp down at Fifth Third Arena. But first, I got to talk to you all real quick about FanDuel. You've all heard a little bit about FanDuel by now, right? I'm sure you all have. But now FanDuel has got something new for you, as now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can get $5 and you'll get a free 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. And then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. And Blackhawks fans, I am so stoked that football season is back. I had a pretty decent week one. I lost a little bit of money, came close to breaking even, I think down about $8. But quite honestly, with my track record and betting on the NFL, that's a pretty good win, especially when I was on vacation. My lock of the week last week did pretty well. I took the Buffalo Bills in a Survivor Series. I'm going to be taking the Baltimore Ravens this week, coming off of a little bit of a disappointing performance or a disappointing result against the Kansas City Chiefs. Almost stole that bad boy, and Harbaugh would have gone for 2. If you want to tail me with the Baltimore Ravens, you can go bet on them right now by visiting FanDuel. All you need as well to cash in on that free 3-week trial of YouTube TV is a Google account and a current form of payment. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Again, quick reminder to smash the like button, comment down below, and to subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much. And also, make sure, now that hockey season is just about to get underway, to go and check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where the season never ends, providing national expertise with a local perspective. You can easily find the link to the Locked On NHL podcast down in the description, or simply search on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Segment 2. Outside of the news of Artyom Levshunov injuring his right foot and being out for this weekend showcase, I would say the biggest bit of news coming from day one of rookie camp was the forward lines in the defensive pairings, as there's only going to be a couple of practices. I believe actually it's only going to be tomorrow before they head on out to St. Louis for the opening game of the showcase. So I think only one more opportunity to see these forward lines in defensive pairings. I don't expect them really to change tomorrow. I'd be a little bit surprised if they did on that front. So basically, I think what we saw here this morning is probably what we're going to see when action begins for the Blackhawks in the opening game of the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase. Starting with the forward group up top, the Blackhawks rolled with Landon Slaggert, who, of course, we saw see a little bit of chunk of NHL time following his final season of college hockey with Notre Dame, where he was the captain and had a really big bounce back season after a really disappointing junior campaign. And quite honestly, his sophomore season wasn't really all that great after kind of setting the standards high during his freshman year with the Fighting Irish, but stepped onto the NHL scene and immediately became, I wouldn't say a playmaker, but he impacted the game in a lot of areas and has some good speed, has some good size, plays a little bit of a power forward type of mold. And then after being snake bitten like literally 3 or 4 times, finally netted his first NHL goal. He's another guy who's right on the fringe potentially of making the NHL roster, even though the expectation is probably for him to open things up with the Rockford Ice Hogs, but getting a really good opportunity right here off the jump, playing on the top line with Frank the Tank Nazar, my boy. No surprise that he's playing as the top line center here. And then Colton Dock serving as the right wing there to round out that trio. I think it's really solid. If you all remember a couple of weeks ago when the roster was announced, who the Blackhawks were going to be sending to St. Louis, I did have Nazar and Doc on the top line for my projected forward lines. However, I had them with Nick Lardis. I did not have them with Landon Slaggert, but I certainly understand it given his plethora of experience and actually getting some NHL time last year. He's one of the elder skatesmen for the Blackhawks in this tournament, so certainly understand him being there. Second line for the Blackhawks, Gavin Hayes, Paul Ludwinski, and Samuel Savoy. If you remember, I particularly said you got to keep Paulie Luds and Samuel Savoy. I'm still not 100% sure. I don't think anyone is 100% sure. Savoy, I'm going to go with because it sounds better, and I love the French side of things. I also took French when I was in middle school, which is a really interesting decision. Anyways, got to keep those two together. They're like little wrecking machines. I think their games complement one another really well. They both love to get physical, both love to mix it up. Ledwinski definitely has better wheels and better offensive attributes. He's a higher end prospect of the two, but Samuel Savoie is someone who I do believe could make it to the NHL. Tough break for him last year as he fractured his fibula during the preseason, a really gruesome injury. Was able to return to finish off the year in the QMJHL. So hopefully he had himself a really good summer and doesn't allow that lower body injury to impact his wheels, because that's going to be a big part of his game if he wants to make it to the next level. I had Ludwinski and Savoie in my projected lines a couple of weeks ago on the third line, along with Landon Slaggert. I think that would make a really good trio, but like to see Gavin Hayes absolutely in a top six role after a couple of mammoth years in the OHL. Third line for the Blackhawks, Nick Lardis. I think I'd like to see him on the top line just because of his offensive abilities and him buzzing out there with Frankie. And they're not sacrificing a lot of size because they have that power forward style with Colton Dach. Wouldn't be surprised at some point in this tournament to see Nick Lardis on the top line. I'm sure he'll be out there on the top power play unit. AJ Spellacy, love to see him. Blackhawks 2024 selection in the later rounds, centering the third line, a guy who's got good size and a lot of speed. And then Martin Misiak, second round selection in 2023, headed back to the Erie Otters of the OHL, where he should firmly have a role in the top six, rounding things out on the third line in that right wing slot. And then on the fourth line, fan favorite Marcel Marcel, who of course was down with the Rockford Ice Hogs, made the quick leap to the AHL after getting drafted by the Blackhawks only that same year. Jalen Lipin down with the Ice Hogs last year, centering the fourth line, and then same with Ryder Rolston, a reoccurring guest here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast. Hopefully I'll be able to get Ryder back on and talk about how things are going now that he's a little bit of a veteran with this Rockford Ice Hogs forward group, and especially the guys that the Blackhawks are sending to St. Louis this week. He's one of the ones who has the most AHL experience in this group. So funny how things change in just a couple of years. And then on the back end for the Blackhawks, Ethan Del Mastro and Nolan Allen are really the only two notables here. Lucas Brenton and Mathurin, King and Kennedy, three undrafted free agent additions that the Blackhawks made to just kind of give some bodies to their back end in this camp, and it's a lot more hurt now that Artyom Levshunov isn't going to be there. That effect I talked about earlier during segment one, and then Ty Henry is only the fourth guy of this group that has true affiliation to the Chicago Blackhawks organization, was their seventh round pick in this year's draft, rounding things out as their seventh defenseman. I expect in one of their games, he's going to be in there playing a bigger role than what we kind of believe is after the role that he had in day one of camp, being up on the outside looking in. As far as the lines that I mentioned a few weeks ago, kind of how they differ here from what I imagined. Like I said, had Nick Lardis with Frank Nazar and Colton Dach. I would like to see that trio at some point in time. Landon Slaggert, Paul Ludwinski, and Samuel Savoie was my second line. I had Ryder Rolston, Martin Misiak, and Gavin Hayes as the third line, and then Alex Ferrand, AJ Spellacy, and Marcel Marcel rounding things out with Jalen Lipin as the extra. Lipin ends up jumping in because Alex Ferrand, unfortunately, 2023 fourth round pick, suffered a minor injury in the Sudbury Wolves OHL preseason game and isn't going to be able to play in the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase. No real update on Ferrand other than that, but nice to hear that it's a minor injury, and hopefully he'll be able to go at some point here in training camp before ultimately getting reassigned to the Sudbury Wolves. And then, of course, Drew Comesso is going to be the main man to watch in net for the Blackhawks here at the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase. Firmly expect him to get the start on in the opening game on Friday. There you have it. I firmly think those are going to be the forward lines and defensive pairings that we see for the Blackhawks. While it's not an official game, their first little bit of action for the 2024-2025 season. So excited that hockey season is so close to being back, Blackhawks fans. Excited to see this tournament get underway in person over the weekend, by the way. For anyone who is traveling to St. Louis for the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase, be sure to hit me up, slide in my DMs. Would love to talk Blackhawks hockey with you. Maybe go get some good eats in the St. Louis area. I got family from the Hill, and I actually lived there one summer. Some of the best Italian food I've ever had. So I know some hidden gems to go to in the St. Louis area. Be sure to hit me up if you plan on making the trek to St. Louis for the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase. But yeah, there are the forward lines and defensive pairings we saw on day one of rookie camp this morning. Before I wrap things up in just a minute, I do got to get into some other tidbits that we got from down at Fifth Third Arena. Real quick, just wanted to say thank you again for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen here to start off your day. And be sure, Locked On Blackhawks Mailbag Monday is right around the corner, and it's going to be a beefy one. I was on vacation, so wasn't able to get to Mailbag Monday this week, but I got a stack of questions coming up. I think it actually might be 3 weeks by the time Mailbag Monday comes out since the last time I did it. So a good boatload of questions, and I know with hockey season right around the corner, all of you out there have at least one Blackhawks question that you'd like to be answered on the show. So please make sure to reach out down in the comment section. You can hit me up in any of my DMs, email lockdownblackhawks@gmail.com, or even jump into the community tab on the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel. Some other little tidbits that I did want to be sure to mention from day one of rookie camp down at Fifth Third Arena. There's like a little spider crawling behind my laptop right now, and it just like disappeared behind my desk. Little terrifying. With still one segment to go here on the show, but I will power through for all of you great Blackhawks fans. First thing I wanted to get to, Ethan Del Mastro was the first player who had a little bit of an interview following day one of festivities. And the key thing that he said, am I going to get this guy? It wasn't a spider. It was like a little gnat. I did get him, which is kind of gross. It is on my finger right now. Everybody ignore that. Ethan Del Mastro. What he said in his player presser that kind of stood out the most to me. And I think it was just a reaffirmation of something that I've been saying all summer long. And I think it was really clear based on the moves from this Blackhawks front office this summer. To quote Ethan Del Mastro, quote, "Management made it clear that all roster spots have to be earned this season." Yeah, I think that was the idea behind kind of beefing up this roster, especially with a lot of veterans. And I mean, like the additions of TJ Brody, right, felt a little bit extra on the back end. Pat Maroon, Craig Smith, the return of Joey Anderson on top of that as well, right? Like it almost feels like there's a little bit of a logjam, like there might be too many bodies for the Blackhawks, but I think that was done on purpose by the front office for guys. They have to prove that they have to earn it. You know, you're not just going to get handed jobs this year with the Blackhawks. This is a little bit of a changing of the guard type of season. We want to make this team more competitive. And in order to do that, you got to be good from top to bottom. The guy from the starting top line center, Connor Bedard, all the way down to the seventh defenseman. They have to be working just as hard. They're all going to have to earn their spots equally. So I really like to hear that. I think that's the expectation. It's what it should be. And like to hear that out of Ethan Del Mastro. And again, really, really curious to see which defensemen and which of the kind of depth forwards are going to wind up on this roster ahead of the opener against Utah. Next, we have Anders Sorensen. Not only did he give the update on Artyom Levshunov, that was notable, but I thought it was also cool to hear him say that he's excited for, quote, the deepest prospect pool he's had to work with since being part of this organization. And the Blackhawks have had pretty good prospect pools the last couple of years, but no doubt about it, now that all of these guys, I mean, not all of them, but a good chunk of them are starting to arrive on the pro scene. Even me as a fan, after talking about, how bad this team has been year after year and all these high-end draft picks and being busy on day one of draft night because the Blackhawks have multiple selections. It's really, really cool to see them starting to step onto the scene. And it feels like Anders Sorensen is just as excited as all of us. And he also referenced that it, quote, will be fun to watch the young defenseman slug it out for playing time, close quote. Gonna be a big battle on the back end. Next up, we got my boy Frank the Tank Nazar. We kind of saw it in clips that were shared on social media, but he was skating in Chicago a lot this summer with Patrick Kane, Blackhawks legend, who still frequents Chicago and does a lot of workouts and skates here. And, for Frank Nazar to be getting an opportunity like that as a young kid going into his first full-time pro season, I mean, just to have the opportunity to as he said, quote, learn some tricks from Patrick Kane and just take everything in out there. And, from one American great, perhaps the greatest American of all time, that is what I believe, to what I hope will be the next great American for the Chicago Blackhawks and Frank Nazar. I really have some high expectations for this kid. Love to see that he enjoyed himself with Patrick Kane this summer, and super cool that he got that opportunity. And I'm sure, knowing the guy that Kaner is, even though he's playing for the Detroit Red Wings nowadays, I'm sure he's still showing some good love and giving some good tidbits and tips to a kid like Frank Nazar. And then AJ Spelliscy was the last one to kind of talk. He said, he first and foremost, he mentioned he got a welcome to the Blackhawks text from the de facto captain, Nick Foligno. Still have not got any official word on what the Blackhawks are going to do for their captaincy this upcoming season. To me, it feels like it's either going to be Nick Foligno or they're going to go with no captain. I believe no captain is probably the more likely option, but certainly wouldn't rule it out. And I mean, whether Nick Foligno has it or not, he is looked at as the captain of this team and really acted like it from day one and throughout the course of the summer. I mean, recruiting guys, talking to guys about how awesome the city is and what the organization is trying to do and how they're really trying to grow back strong right here, right now. Not only doing that, reaching out to vets, but I mean, texting a later round draft pick like AJ Spelliscy just shows you the type of guy that Nick Foligno is and how blessed we are to have him kind of as the head honcho of this Blackhawks squad. But AJ talked about how this year in Windsor, he's really going to be looked at as a leader of that group, as a returner, and he takes on that role with Amzwad Opan, as Creed once said. So that's cool to hear that AJ is enjoying that opportunity and is looking forward to it, I guess I should say. And he's really hoping that he's going to make the most of his time here in training camp, at rookie camp, and throughout the course of this upcoming season in the OHL with the Windsor Spitfires in order to try and get an NHL contract at some point before the end of the year. He said that's his goal. And I mean, with his speed and physicality and I mean, his unbelievable athleticism, the guy, I feel like whatever sport AJ Spelliscy chose, he was going to be a pro at it. And hockey was just kind of something he figured out he was really good at like 16, 17 years of age, and then kind of put all his chips into that basket. A couple years later, he winds up getting drafted. And I believe he's a guy who has a high ceiling because of the speed that he carries and his physicality. Never going to be a game breaker offensively, but a unique puzzle piece. And quite honestly, I think that's intriguing to this Chicago Blackhawks group that, kind of have a lot of middling forwards outside of Connor Bedard and Frank Nazar and Oliver Moore up front. If a guy like AJ Spelliscy can provide value in unique ways, I think that could give him a legitimate shot to be a bottom sixer for the Blackhawks one day down the road. So going to be fun to see all of these guys in action throughout the weekend at the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase. Again, Blackhawks kicked that thing off on Friday night down in St. Louis. I will be back on the show tomorrow to touch on everything that went down of day 2 at rookie camp at Fifth Third Arena before the Blackhawks ultimately send out to St. Louis on Friday. But that's going to wrap up today's episode, everyone. Again, thank you for joining once again. Be sure to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. It really does help me out. It won't cost you anything. And also that way you can get the latest episode as soon as it's uploaded each and every day. And if you want to catch Locked On Blackhawks on the go, if you're not able to, watch a YouTube video throughout the course of your day, you can go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free as well, wherever you may be listening to your podcast. And if you are someone who regularly listens, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it may be, please make sure to rate and review the show as well. That also helps me out tremendously. And again, if you want to follow me on X, you can find me at Jack Bushman 2. Check out at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. So until the next episode, everyone, have a great rest of your day. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.